Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of RE042, where I take old stories I've narrated and update them to modern audio standards. And I hope that you enjoy. This particular one is called The Last Eclipse, written by RegalLegalEagle. A total solar eclipse is actually a relatively rare astral phenomenon for an inhabited world. So many things have to line up just right for it to happen. A planet having an appropriately sized moon, a star at just the right distance, no other astral bodies blocking anything. It's all got to line up perfectly. Not to mention all the trouble of finding a planet that's already got life on it. And even then, the path of totality is a fairly narrow strip spread across the planet below. Well, narrow as far as planet-sized distances are concerned, I mean, Dr. Gibbs added with a shrug at the end. And here we are, Amy sighed softly as she looked across the valley before them. It was only the two of them out here now. The fleet couldn't spare many citizens for what they deemed non-essential roles, so she was Dr. Gibbs' only grad student. They'd picked up a small hill overlooking the area to better watch the eclipse. And as the light of the star above them slowly began to grow dimmer, she could sense the subtle yet growing unease of animals who didn't understand what was happening. Several billion years of existence, who knows how many millions of it supporting life, untold generations that lived and died here in a slow yet never-ending march of change. Species evolved to suit their environment and survive all manner of ecological disaster and natural predator. But for the dimming of their star, they are lost and entirely confused, Dr. Gibbs added, as they saw flocks of what passed for the planet's avians start to twist in circles as they tried to figure out what was going on. They could hear the soft braying of various animals through the valley as the sky got even darker. Amy looked up at the star, her visor correcting the brightness to allow her to stare at it. How long do we have until totality? Won't be long, Dr. Gibbs replied, as both just kept watching. They didn't need to talk about it to know they both knew they should really be working still, gathering more specimens and ensuring that the ship was filled to the brim. But they had a feeling that they needed to observe this, that the planet deserved a moment of reverence as the light of the star was dimmed further and further as the two heavenly bodies above them intersected. To gather more specimens now seemed a bit like robbing a dying man. Though, to do it later would just be grave robbing, so they weren't sure if either option was better or worse. Was it like this for the animals back on Earth? Amy asked, tearing her eyes off the sky to look at the spiraling patterns of avians in the sky and see the clustering of herd animals as they brayed and called out, upset and disoriented by the change in their natural order. Yes, it's not like they had the capacity to understand it. Hell, humanity didn't even have the capacity to understand it either for a very long time. Old prophecies would speak of portent death, plague, famine, and all manner of evil brought on by what was nothing more than an entirely natural and harmless event. When we finally understood it, I'm sure that we laughed at the old superstitions. But the animals couldn't know. It's a deep, primal thing to fear the dark, and another to fear the sudden fading of the light. Dr. Gibbs sighed softly. I didn't realize it would get cold so quickly, Amy mentioned, as her suit notified her of the decrease in the ambient temperature. Blocking the light of a star has that effect, Dr. Gibbs mentioned with a shrug. By now, the edges of the horizon were still light, but their position in the center of the shadow made for an odd effect, as if the darkness was personally directed at them on their hilltop. The only sapient life here to witness it. Their visors further corrected the light above them, as they could see the ethereal wisps of the star's corona leaking out around the disk of darkness. This doesn't seem right, Amy finally muttered. No, I believe it's all on schedule, Dr. Gibbs replied with a glance at his wrist to check his comms lock. Not, ethically, Amy said with a wave around them. Like you said, this is a million years of life, infinite possibilities for their future, gone. Aren't there rules against doing things like this? I imagine there were a lot of rules against all manner of things before we were reduced to a single wayward fleet, keeping just ahead of the scouts of our enemy, Dr. Gibbs wryly observed. Why this planet? Why not another? Any other? Amy asked next. The Admiralty doesn't make decisions like this lightly. The planet is rich in something, I don't know. It's not my field. Dr. Gibbs sounded tired in that moment. Defeated, almost. As if the only thing he could do to deflect some measure of his own guilt and sorrows was to pretend as if it was all in the hands of another. That his ignorance in the matter left the gulf of mystery that only imagination could fill with the importance of what lay beneath the surface of the world they stood on. To tip the scales against the life that was all around them, the rustling of trees and bushes in the wind, the worried calls of the animals, the panicked cries of the avians in the air looking for a place to shelter in the sudden onset of night. By now their vision had compensated fully as they stood in totality. The disk above them was no natural moon, but a ship, massive in both scope and function, its arms slowly unfolding high above the world as a million souls prepared for their labors ahead. So we kill a planet full of life, hundreds of species dead, gone to the universe forevermore, Amy growled. Not quite. Our ship is almost full. They'll continue to exist in some capacity. The Admiralty is giving us the resources to ensure they avoid total extinction, even species that aren't useful as cattle or food. It was Dr. Gibbs' small victory, but he clung to it tightly. What life is that? To live within a ship for all their days, their home gone, their sky taken. Does their inability to fully comprehend this make it any better? Amy tore her eyes from the eclipse above them to eye Dr. Gibbs directly. Are you asking on behalf of ours? Dr. Gibbs asked back. Life in the fleet is our only chance, right? We know that. They might not, but it'll be true for them now too. If this wasn't their last eclipse, then it would be ours. Existence is conflict. Survival is struggle. That sounds suspiciously like something our enemy would say, Amy growled softly with an accusatory tone. That doesn't make them wrong, Dr. Gibbs replied with a shrug. What can we afford to do or not do when faced with extinction? Should we mourn that these animals lack sapience, or celebrate that their ignorance saves them some small measure of fear in the last days of their life in this world? We've created the ship the size of a moon, and we eat planets so that we do not suffer the same fate. We are, if nothing else, determined to exist. But does our determination make us heroes or monsters? Amy's question hung in the air between them. At first, the only answer was the uneasy sounds of the animals in the valley, who only understood that something was wrong with their world. Finally, Dr. Gibbs responded with the only thing that he could think of. I don't know, but we need to get back to work. Once the arms are extended, they'll deploy the tethers, and we don't want to be around when that happens. If we delay the schedule, any existential crisis we have will be the least of our worries. Unless you enjoy Captain Ong's screaming matches, Dr. Gibbs suggested with a glance at his lone grad student. Her shoulders sagged as she had to weigh the comfort of her life and the lives of everyone else in the fleet against her concerns over a planet that she'd only just set foot on. A planet lacking sapient life, but rich in, whatever it was they needed. She also had to weigh her soul against being screamed at. And after a moment, she turned to start walking back down the hill. All right, let's get back to work then. Maybe I'll feel better once we get to enjoy fresh meat for once. I'm not sure I even remember what it is like to eat anything other than food paste. Honestly, I envy that about you youngsters. The fake steak they serve sometimes just makes me depressed. Dr. Gibbs turned to follow her as they turned their backs on this nameless planet's first and last eclipse. End of story. I'd quickly like to thank the T5 peeps: Cold War Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Bushmaster 177, Henry the Red, Caspar Arnholtz, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Elijah Silvercross, Dragzoon WRE, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.